The vote to oust Earth passed, then humanity made their rules known. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The chamber lights burned with a cold, electric blue as the final vote passed, the air humming like a pressure leak against Captain Elias Ward's skin. He stood motionless on the polished alloy floor, feeling the faint tremor of the station's grave plates through his boots. Above him, the holographic tally rotated in slow, merciless clarity, Earth, expelled. His breath formed a thin mist inside his visor ring, the recycled air tasting faintly metallic, like old copper pipes. Around him, 1,000 alien delegates shifted in their seats, their feathers, scales, and crystalline skin catching the chamber's sterile light as whispers rippled outward like a cold tide. They didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence itself was a verdict. A soft chime sounded, clinical, almost polite, as the council speaker, a glass-skinned Archon with a voice like fracturing ice, announced, "The Terran delegation is dismissed." Effective immediately. Elias felt the weight of the moment press into his ribs, a silent punch he wasn't sure he could hide. But he locked his jaw, kept his spine straight, and lifted his eyes toward the galaxy's ruling elite. They looked at him the way scientists look at a dangerous animal behind reinforced glass. A creature they'd rather put down, if protocol allowed. The stench of ozone clung to the chamber vents. Someone's translator unit clicked and whirred, struggling to process the emotional tension in the room. And somewhere behind him, an alien delegate muttered in a low, clicking dialect, "Humans, too volatile to remain." Elias inhaled, the air sharp in his throat. He could hear his own pulse echoing faintly in his left ear, a reminder of the shrapnel still lodged there from a relief mission gone sideways years ago. He had rebuilt colonies, negotiated ceasefires, saved species who would never remember his name. And today, none of it mattered. A security drone drifted close, its lens dilating as it scanned him for traces of defiance. The urge to shove it away burned under his skin, but he exhaled slowly, letting the heat bleed off his breath. His father had taught him long ago, humans don't break first. We endure. The chamber doors hissed open behind him, warm air mixing with the cold council atmosphere, carrying the scent of disinfectant and engine coolant from the station's main spine. But before he stepped out, something unexpected happened. A small alien attendant, a winged species barely 4 feet tall, stumbled near the threshold as the grave plates flickered again. One wing crumpled, the thin membrane snapping with a sound like tearing paper. The crowd didn't react. Not their problem. Not their pain. Elias moved before he realized it, catching the little being in a firm but gentle grip. The creature gasped, iridescent eyes wide as he steadied its trembling frame. "Easy," Elias murmured. "You're okay. Just breathe." A few nearby delegates watched, their expressions unreadable. The injured attendant fluttered weakly, clutching his sleeve. "Why, would you help me?" it whispered. "Your people were just cast out." Elias managed a faint smile, even as something heavy twisted in his chest. "Kid, that's exactly why it matters." The chamber fell strangely quiet, the kind of silence that feels like a lens adjusting, refocusing. Elias didn't look back. He simply helped the attendant to a medical drone and stepped into the corridor's warmer air, the blue light fading behind him. But as the doors sealed shut, he felt the shift, subtle, almost electrical, like the galaxy itself had just witnessed something it didn't quite understand. The vote to oust Earth had passed. But what came next would not go the way they expected. Captain Elias Ward felt the corridor's warmer air settle around him like a thin blanket, carrying the hum of maintenance drones and the faint scent of coolant leaking from somewhere deep within the station's arteries. As the chamber doors sealed behind him, their metallic thud echoed through his chest, a reminder that Earth had just been cut out of the galactic body like a diseased organ. His boots clicked sharply against the alloy walkway as he moved, not in anger, but with the steady pace of someone trying to outrun the weight building behind his ribs. The holographic display above the hallway repeated the Council's decision in rotating amber letters. And every few steps, delegates glanced his way before quickly looking elsewhere, as if eye contact with a human might stain them. Elias kept his gaze forward. He had endured war zones, famine belts, collapsed colonies, and diplomatic rooms where every sentence was a blade. This was just another storm to walk through. But halfway down the corridor, a crystalline voice cut across his path. "Captain Ward." He stopped. The sound had the distinct timbre of someone accustomed to being obeyed. High Consul Arkina stood beneath a circular skylight, her translucent skin refracting the station's artificial sunlight into shifting spectra that danced across the metal floor. Her posture was immaculate, hands folded behind her back, expression carved from cold diplomacy. Her eyes, however, carried a flicker of something less rigid. Curiosity, maybe. Or disappointment disguised as protocol. She approached with measured steps, the kind that never wasted motion. "You remained composed in the chamber," she said. "Even after Earth's expulsion." Elias felt a small spark, something between amusement and bitterness, curl inside him. "What would you have preferred, High Consul? A tantrum?" Arkina tilted her head, as if studying a specimen that spoke back. "Many believed humans incapable of restraint. Yet you helped that injured attendant moments after being dismissed." "He needed help," Elias replied simply. "And it had nothing to do with politics." A subtle shimmer crossed Arkina's crystalline face, like a hairline crack being briefly illuminated. "Not anger. Not mockery. Something else." A long pause stretched, filled only by the soft vibration of the station's engines and the distant buzz of transit rails overhead. Arkina finally said, "The Council fears your species." Elias exhaled slowly. "They already made that clear. Not for the reasons you assume." Her voice dipped lower, almost conspiratorial. "Humans are unpredictable. You adapt quickly. Too quickly. In times of crisis, you improvise, you endure, and you survive through methods most species find unsettling." Elias huffed a quiet breath. "Endurance is not a crime." "No," Arkina agreed. "But it is a power. One that frightens civilizations built on rigid structure." She stepped closer, the light bending along her form as if the station itself parted for her. "Tell me truthfully, Captain Ward. Will your people retaliate?" Elias searched her refracted eyes. "Does helping a kid who fell down look like retaliation?" Arkina's pupils contracted, her species equivalent of a flinch. "You misunderstand. Retaliation for humans does not always mean weapons. Sometimes it means influence. Innovation. Changing the balance of the galaxy by simply existing." Elias felt the corridor grow quieter around them, as if the station leaned closer to listen. "Earth did not ask for a fight," he said. "But we are not walking away from ourselves." Arkina stared at him for a long, unreadable moment. Then she murmured, "That is precisely what they fear." Before he could answer, the floor beneath them trembled with a short, sharp jolt. Lights flickered overhead. A klaxon blared in 3 alien languages before resolving into Terran speech, "Containment breach detected." Section 12. Emergency personnel respond. Delegates scattered, their polished composure evaporating as they hurried toward the safer districts of the station. Arkina's calm finally cracked. That section houses the core stabilizers. If containment fails, Elias was already moving. Then what are we standing here for? The consul hesitated only a fraction before following him, her crystalline steps ringing like chimes behind him. As they sprinted down the corridor, the alarm lights strobing red across their faces, Elias felt that familiar, dangerous heat rising in his chest. The galaxy had just voted Earth out. But the galaxy also desperately needed someone who ran toward the fire instead of away from it. And humans had always done exactly that. The emergency lights pulsed in a deep crimson rhythm as Captain Elias Ward sprinted down the corridor, the metallic floor panels vibrating beneath his boots with every alarm cycle. High Consul Arcina kept pace behind him, her crystalline footsteps ringing sharp and bright, scattering prismatic reflections across the walls like shards of fractured starlight. The further they moved toward Section 12, the hotter the air became, carrying a faint metallic tang that stung the back of Elias's throat. A containment breach in the stabilizer core was not a simple malfunction, it meant something had struck at the beating heart of the station, the place where gravity, atmosphere, and energy fields wove together in a delicate web. A failure there would tear half the structure open to space in seconds. Why is the core unshielded during a council session? Elias called over the wailing klaxons. Arcina's voice was sharp, clipped. It should not be. Maintenance was suspended during the vote. Elias felt a cold prickle move across the back of his neck. Convenient timing. The consul said nothing, but her silence spoke. With a weight of suspicion. As they rounded a corner, a trio of panicked delegates burst from a ruptured bulkhead, translucent dust coating their robes. One shouted, "The plasma coils are overheating, they will cascade." Another cried, "Stay away from Section 12, it is death." Elias did not slow, his stride steady and determined. The consul watched him for a breath, as if re-evaluating every assumption she had ever held about humans, then followed him deeper into the danger. The temperature spiked as they entered the main causeway leading to the stabilizer core. The air rippled with waves of heat distortion, and a low, thrumming hum vibrated through the reinforced struts overhead. Elias raised one arm, shielding his eyes from the blinding flare where the containment field flickered like a sputtering flame. Arcina pointed to a cracked panel spilling sparks. The gravitic regulator is destabilizing. If it collapses fully, the core will implode. Elias scanned the corridor. Emergency drones buzzed frantically, but their limbs spasmed as if scrambling to compensate for unpredictable gravity shifts. Panels along the wall bulged outward, groaning under pressure, while loose debris floated in short, erratic bursts before slamming back to the deck. "This was not an accident," Arcina said quietly. Elias looked at her. "You sound certain." She nodded, her crystalline skin dimming. "Someone timed this to occur immediately after Earth's expulsion. The council chamber ensures maximum distraction." A sharp tremor rattled the walkway. A pipe above them ruptured, scattering a rain of scalding steam mixed with glowing motes. Elias shoved Arcina down just in time, the blast searing across his shoulder with a burning sting. The pain flared, but he pushed it aside, he had lived through worse. Arcina rose, her voice strained. "You risked yourself for me." "Why?" Elias could only stare at her. "You needed help." "That is enough." Something flickered behind her eyes, something almost human in its fragility, but the moment was cut short when a violent jolt sent both of them stumbling forward. The stabilizer chamber loomed ahead, its circular entrance glowing with pulsing blue bands barely holding back a swirling maelstrom of energy. "How long do we have?" Elias asked. Arcina raised a trembling hand toward the flickering console. "Minutes at best." Elias examined the failing machinery. A collapsed support beam pinned a control conduit to the floor, crushing it like a soda can, sparks cascading outward with each pulse of the failing field. A manual reset housing sat across the chamber, its lever locked behind a half-melted barrier. "If I can reach that reset, I can force the containment to reinitialize," he said. "The heat will vaporize you," Arcina warned. Elias shook his head. "Not if I am fast." She grabbed his arm, her crystalline grip surprisingly strong. "This is not your station. This is not your fight. You owe us nothing." Elias met her gaze, the flickering blue light carving harsh lines across his face. "Maybe not. But if that core blows, it takes thousands of lives with it. I am not about to stand here and watch people die." Arcina's voice softened, almost a whisper beneath the roar of the failing stabilizer. "Your people were just cast out. Why save ours?" Elias stepped forward, gripping a support strut as another tremor rocked the chamber. "Because humanity does not walk away when things get dangerous. We run toward the fire." He took a breath, feeling the heat bite into his skin. Then, without hesitation, he lunged toward the failing core, the searing air clawing at him as the station's survival balanced on the edge of his outstretched hand. The heat slammed into Captain Elias Ward the moment he crossed the threshold, a scorching wave that clawed at his exposed skin and made every breath feel like inhaling sparks. The stabilizer chamber roared around him, the failing containment field throwing jagged arcs of blue energy across the metallic walls, each crackling burst lighting the room like a thunderstorm caught inside a steel drum. Every instinct told him to turn back, but instincts had never dictated Elias Ward's actions, conviction did. Behind him, High Consul Arkina shouted something, her voice swallowed by the roar of the core. Elias could faintly make out, "Your body cannot withstand this," but her warning dissolved under the violent pulse of the machinery. He pressed forward, each step a battle against the distorted gravity that dragged at his limbs in unpredictable surges. One moment his boots felt anchored by hundreds of pounds of force, the next he nearly floated off the deck as the stabilizer's magnetic field snapped and recoiled like a wounded beast. Sweat streamed down the side of his face, sizzling as it hit the superheated metal railing he used to pull himself forward. The manual reset housing glowed a molten orange behind a half-melted barrier. The panel was warped, edges curled inward like the petals of a dying flower. Elias braced himself, shoved his shoulder against the barrier, and felt the blistering heat tear through the fabric of his uniform. Pain lanced through him, bright and sharp, but he gritted his teeth, shoved harder, and forced the panel to bend just enough for his body to slip through. A blast of energy knocked him to one knee. The chamber flickered. Gravity dipped, surged, then trembled. The core was seconds from collapse. "Elias!" Arkina's voice reached him again, closer now. He turned to see her stepping through the heat shimmer, her crystalline skin dimming under the intensity, cracks spiderwebbing along her forearms. "What are you doing?" he yelled. "You cannot survive here." She steadied herself against the wall, the surface hissing under her touch. "I will not watch you die alone." He wanted to argue, he wanted to push her back through the threshold. But there was no time. The reset lever gleamed under the flickering light, protected by a fused lock that had partially melted, sealing it in place. Elias wrapped both hands around the metal housing. Heat seared through his palms instantly, the smell of scorched material rising in a harsh wave. He braced his feet, pulled with everything he had, and felt the lock resist like the jaws of a steel predator. "The core is collapsing," Arkina warned, her voice trembling. "If you cannot reset it in the next few seconds, the field will implode." "Then count for me," Elias growled through clenched teeth. Arkina's crystalline eyes widened, the fractured light inside them flickering like a dying star. But she obeyed. 5. Elias pulled harder, his vision blurring. The lock groaned, metal fibers snapping under the strain. 4. A surge of gravity slammed him sideways, driving him into the console with enough force to bruise bone. Arkina stumbled forward, catching him before he fell entirely. 3. Elias steadied himself, fingers slipping on the burning metal. 2. He gave one final, desperate pull. The lock snapped open with a scream of tearing alloy. Elias seized the lever and yanked it down. The containment field exploded in a burst of blinding white light, engulfing the chamber like a nova compressed into a heartbeat. For a moment, there was only silence. No heat. No gravity. No sound. Just a hollow, ringing stillness. Then the stabilizer core thudded back to life, its energy pulsing in steady, controlled waves. The lights returned to their normal glow, and the oppressive heat faded into a manageable warmth. Elias collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. His hands were scorched, his uniform charred, his pulse hammering like a drum. Arkina knelt beside him, cracks along her crystalline skin slowly sealing as her body cooled. She stared at him with something that was no longer suspicion, no longer political distance. It was awe. "You just saved an entire station of people who voted to cast you out," she whispered. Elias forced himself to his feet, wincing as the pain caught up with him. "They did what they believed was right," he said quietly. And I did what I know is right. Arkina rose with him, her expression shifting into something he had never seen from her species: humility. Gratitude. Fear of how wrong they might have been. Captain Ward, she said softly, the galaxy has misjudged humanity. Elias looked out over the now stable core, the faint hum vibrating through the floor. Then it is time, he said, for the galaxy to learn who we really are. The station may have cast Earth out, but humanity had just saved them all. Captain Elias Ward steadied himself against the railing as the stabilizer chamber cooled, every breath dragging heat from his lungs as if his body was still trying to outrun the inferno he had just walked through. The metallic tang of scorched circuitry hung heavy in the air, mixing with the low, rhythmic thrum of the core that now pulsed in calm, controlled waves. High Consul Arkina stood beside him, her crystalline skin slowly regaining its natural luminosity as the cracks sealed one by one with faint chimes, like ice mending under sunrise. Her eyes, once cold and unreadable, now rested on him with a weight he had never seen from a member of the Galactic Council. It was not merely gratitude, it was the dawning realization that everything she had been taught about humans was wrong. "You should not be standing," she said, her voice quiet but charged. "Your hands are burned, your shoulder is wounded, and your pulse is unstable." Elias flexed his fingers, the scorched fabric of his gloves crumbling. His hands throbbed, each heartbeat sending a flare of pain through his palms, but he brushed it off with a dry breath. "I have been worse." Arkina stared at him, astonished. "How can you say that after surviving temperatures that would have liquefied most species?" Elias gave a small shrug, wincing as it tugged on the burn across his shoulder. "Humans are built strange." Before she could respond, the station's overhead lights flickered back to full brightness, and an announcement echoed through the corridor with renewed clarity: containment restored. Stabilizer core secure. All personnel report to your designated safe zones. The sterile, controlled voice belied the fact that the entire station had been seconds from annihilation. A few moments later, the distant sound of hurried footsteps grew louder. A cluster of security officers and engineers flooded into the causeway, weapons drawn and scanners raised. When they saw Elias and Arkina standing amidst the still settling dust, they froze. Then, without warning, the entire group dropped to their knees in unison. Arkina stiffened. "What are you doing?" The lead engineer bowed his head, voice trembling. "High Consul, we monitored the chamber's collapse. No living being should have survived in there. We believed you both lost." His gaze shifted to Elias, eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain Ward, you saved the station." Elias felt dozens of eyes on him, each one processing what they had witnessed through surveillance feeds and thermal scans. He lifted a hand in a modest gesture. "I did what anyone would have done." Arkina turned sharply toward him. "No," she corrected. "You did what a human would have done." More personnel arrived, joining the growing crowd. Their expressions carried fear, awe, and something else, shame. Many of them had voted to expel Earth. Many of them had celebrated. Elias could see it in the way they avoided meeting his eyes. The station commander, a towering reptilian dignitary named Velos, stepped forward, his golden armor reflecting the steady pulse of the core. He clasped his claws together and bowed deeply. "Captain Ward, the Galactic Council owes you a debt beyond measure." Elias shook his head. This was not about debts. It was about saving lives. Velos straightened, his slit pupils narrowing. "Your people were cast out hours ago. You had no obligation to save any of us. Yet you walked into the fire." Elias's jaw tightened. "When someone needs help, you help them. That is how humanity works." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alien voices trading shocked whispers. Arkina stepped forward, her voice carrying the tone of authority that could silence entire assemblies. "Let it be known," she declared, "that today, a human risked his life to save this station. Let it be known that humanity carries a strength none of us understood." Her crystalline hand hovered near Elias's shoulder, as if she wanted to steady him but was hesitant to cross a line her species rarely crossed. "You are injured." He allowed himself a faint smile. I will live. You will barely stand, she retorted, but the sharp edges of her tone were softened by something warmer. Medical quarters are down the hall. Come. As they began walking, the crowd parted before them, creating a path of reverent silence. Aliens who once saw humanity as volatile, primitive, chaotic now looked at Elias Ward with an expression reserved only for legends. And as the door to the medical wing hissed open, Arkina spoke in a hushed voice meant only for him. Captain Ward, what you did today will echo beyond this station. Elias inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle across his shoulders like a new kind of gravity. Then let us make sure the galaxy hears it clearly. He stepped into the med bay, unaware that outside its doors, the story of the human who saved his enemies was already spreading like wildfire through the stars. The med bay lights bathed Captain Elias Ward in a cool, sterile glow as he eased himself onto the examination platform, the faint creak of his scorched uniform audible even over the gentle hum of diagnostic equipment. The room smelled of antiseptic mist and ozone, a strangely comforting scent that reminded him of field hospitals on half a dozen war-torn colonies. A soft cascade of holographic panels flickered to life around him, scanning every inch of burnt skin and bruised muscle. Arkina stood a few feet away, her posture rigid but her eyes unsettled in a way Elias had not seen before. The crystalline patterns across her arms shimmered faintly, shifting like frost reacting to a warm breath. She was trying to remain formal, distant, composed, but the cracks in her composure showed through more clearly than the fractures that had marred her crystalline skin inside the core. You should lie flat, she said, her voice carrying a command more out of concern than protocol. Your pulse remains elevated, and your epidermal layer has sustained extensive thermal damage. Elias forced a small grin. You are saying I am burned. The medical drone hovering beside him emitted a disapproving chirp, as if agreeing with her assessment. Arkina stepped closer, her expression sharpening. This is not the time for humor. Humor is how humans avoid passing out, Elias replied with a slow exhale. The drone extended a narrow device toward Elias's hand, emitting a soft spray that cooled the blistered skin and sent a soothing numbness crawling up his arm. Arkina watched as the drone continued its work, her gaze lingering longer than she intended. Elias noticed. You look like you want to ask something, he said quietly. The consul hesitated, a flicker of light rippling across her crystal-like features. The station recovered the sensor recordings, she said at last. They show your body enduring heat that should have destroyed you. How can one species absorb such trauma? Elias looked down at his bandaged hands, flexing them slowly as the numbness spread. Humans are stubborn, he answered simply. And when people are in danger, we do what we have to do. Arkina tilted her head slightly, as if studying a riddle carved into living stone. I have lived 240 years. In all that time, no species has ever reacted the way you did. Elias met her gaze. Maybe that is the problem. You all think survival is about power or control. Humans survive because we help each other. Even when it hurts. Arkina's lips parted slightly, not in argument but in something closer to wonder. Your actions contradict every council doctrine about your species. Then the doctrines were wrong. Before she could respond, the medbay doors slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Velos entered, his reptilian armor clinking faintly. Behind him was a group of officers, their expressions a mixture of relief and hesitation. Captain Ward, Velos said, bowing his crested head. The council demands your presence immediately. Elias raised an eyebrow. I just saved their station. They can wait until my hands stop glowing. But Velos shook his head gravely. They insist. There has been a development. Arkina stepped forward, her voice suddenly sharper. He is not ready to stand, much less face the council. His body has not recovered. Velos looked between them, uneasy. High Consul, the matter is urgent. A transmission. Arrived moments ago. It concerns the explosion in the stabilizer chamber. Elias leaned forward. Someone confessed. Not exactly, Velos replied. but the message indicates that the event was engineered by an external faction. A faction that intends to blame humanity. The room grew still, the medbay lights casting long shadows that stretched across the floor. Arkina's crystalline skin dimmed dangerously. Who would do such a thing? Velos hesitated. The message came from a source claiming to represent the Ascendancy of Vornax. Elias exhaled sharply. Vornax. They have opposed Earth for decades. They see humanity as a threat, Arkina added, her tone tight. A destabilizing force that disrupts their centuries of control. Velos nodded grimly. Their transmission states that the containment breach was meant to demonstrate the Council's need to remove Earth permanently, and they intend to release the footage galaxy-wide. Elias clenched his jaw, ignoring the flare of pain in his shoulder. So they tried to blow up a station just to frame us. To justify war, Arkina corrected softly. To justify erasing your people. The medbay felt smaller suddenly, as if the air had thickened around them. Elias pushed himself upright, the medical drone buzzing nervously around him. Fine, he said. If the Council wants to talk, I will talk. Arkina lifted a hand, her crystalline fingers brushing lightly against his uninjured arm, the gesture subtle but undeniably protective. You do not have to face them alone. Elias held her gaze. High Consul, why are you standing with me? Her voice softened, but carried a fragile sincerity. Because today, you ran into the fire to save my people. She paused, light shimmering through her crystalline skin. And now, it is my turn to stand in the fire with you. Elias nodded once, steady and resolute, then stepped off the examination platform. The medbay doors opened before them with a whisper of cool air. Together, they walked toward the Council chamber, unaware that every corridor camera broadcasted their movements to a station full of stunned witnesses, and that for the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council would face a human who had already proven what his species was capable of. The corridor leading to the Council chamber thrummed with a low, resonant vibration as Captain Elias Ward and High Consul Arkina walked side by side, their footsteps echoing against alloy panels still warm from the earlier system. Overload, everywhere they passed, station personnel paused mid-stride, conversations dying in their throats as they witnessed the wounded human and the crystalline consul moving with united purpose. Elias felt the faint sting of his half-healed burns with each movement, the medical spray numbing the worst of it but unable to mask the deeper ache that pulsed beneath his ribs. Still, he pushed forward, jaw set, breath steady, refusing to show the slightest weakness. Arkina hovered close enough that the faint prismatic shimmer of her skin brushed the corner of his vision, a silent promise that she would not let him face what awaited alone. As they approached the main entrance, a set of towering alloy doors etched with the sigils of 37 civilizations, 2 armed guards stepped forward, their posture stiff with apprehension. One raised a trembling claw and said, "Captain Ward." "High Consul, the Council is in emergency session." They ordered no entry until deliberations conclude. Arkina's chin lifted, her crystalline features turning sharply luminous. "Stand aside," she commanded, the authority in her voice slicing clean through the air. "We bring information the Council cannot, and will not, delay." The guards hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping away, heads bowed, the doors parted with a hydraulic sigh, releasing a wash of cold, sterile air that prickled against Elias's burned skin. Inside, the chamber roared with layered voices, a chaotic swell of debating delegates whose words clashed like metal striking stone. The moment Elias crossed the threshold, the noise collapsed into absolute silence. Thousands of eyes, glowing, multifaceted, luminescent, or shadowed, fixed on him. Some widened in shock. Others narrowed with resentment. A few shimmered with fear. The council speaker, towering and glass-skinned, rose slowly from the central dais. "Captain Ward," he announced, his voice like the cracking of frozen lakes, "you enter this chamber uninvited. Earth has been expelled. You no longer hold standing here." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "If that were true, you would not be scrambling to understand a crisis you cannot solve." A ripple of murmurs slithered through the chamber. Arkina stepped forward, her crystalline hands clasped behind her back. "Honor delegates," she said, voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics, the containment breach was no accident. We have received a transmission from the Ascendancy of Vornax. They engineered the explosion in Section 12. A gasped chorus filled the room. The Vornaxian delegates recoiled, their scaled faces contorting with feigned outrage. One slammed a fist against his desk. "Lies," he hissed. "Your accusations are baseless slander designed to protect the human." Elias stepped forward, feeling heat flare under his skin. "I pulled a melted lock apart with my own hands. Whoever sabotaged the core knew the system inside out. They wanted mass casualties. They wanted someone to blame." He swept the chamber with a hard stare. "And you had just voted to expel Earth." The speaker's voice reverberated. "Present your evidence." Velos, the reptilian commander, entered from the side door, carrying a projection module. With a single tap, the chamber filled with a holographic feed, the flickering shadow of a Vornaxian agent placing a device beside the stabilizer housing, then fleeing. More footage followed, intercepted transmissions, encoded orders, and a chilling declaration from the Ascendancy. The galaxy must be shown that Earth is a threat. The Council will see reason when they witness humanity's downfall. The chamber erupted in horrified outcry. Several delegates rose from their seats in shock, others turned on the Vornaxian representatives, whose composure visibly fractured. Arkina stepped closer to Elias, her voice low enough only he could hear. "This shifts everything." The speaker slammed his crystalline staff against the dais, sending a ringing chime across the chamber. "Silence." He turned his sharp gaze toward Elias. "Captain Ward. The station owes you its survival. Had you not intervened, thousands would have perished." Elias drew a steady breath, the burn along his shoulder pulsing as he straightened. "I did what was right," he said. "Not for politics. Not for gratitude. For lives." A hush fell again, deeper and heavier than before. The speaker's eyes narrowed, reflecting Elias in fractured light. Humanity was condemned hours ago for unpredictability, for danger, for potential disruption. He paused, the chamber holding its breath. "Yet today, you saved those who condemned you." Arkina stepped beside Elias, her crystalline form shimmering with conviction. "Because that is who humans are," she said. "They fix what breaks. Even when the galaxy breaks them." A tremor of emotion, subtle but undeniable, moved across the chamber. For the first time since Earth's expulsion, it felt like the weight of an entire galaxy was shifting direction, pulled by something they had underestimated for centuries, the unstoppable gravity of human character. A voice from the upper tiers whispered, barely audible but carrying through the stillness. "What will humanity do now?" Elias did not look away. "Now? We tell the galaxy our rules." The chamber froze, the word settling like a spark in a room full of kindling, and every delegate knew, in that moment, that nothing about the balance of power in the stars would ever be the same again. The chamber hung in a breathless silence as Captain Elias Ward's word settled over thousands of delegates, their faces bathed in the cold, blue glow of the suspended holograms that displayed the Vornaxian sabotage. His burns ached beneath his uniform, a dull throbbing that traveled up his arms and across his shoulder, but he stood tall, spine locked straight, refusing to show even a flicker of weakness. High Consul Arkina stood beside him, her crystalline form reflecting fractured beams of light that shimmered with every subtle shift in the air. She did not speak, not yet, but the chamber felt the weight of her presence like a charged pulse ready to strike. The council speaker, towering and translucent, finally broke the silence. "Captain Ward," he said, his voice echoing like distant thunder, "if humanity has rules, then state them. The galaxy listens." A low murmur rippled across the tiers, some delegates leaning forward, others recoiling. Elias inhaled, slow and steady, tasting the faint metallic tang of the stabilizer core still clinging to his lungs. "Rule number 1, he said, his voice even, carrying across the chamber. "Humanity does not abandon people in danger. Ever. You left us behind. We did not return the favor." Shocked whispers erupted, many delegates shifted uncomfortably, their eyes avoiding his. Arkina watched him with a quiet intensity, her iridescent pupils narrowing slightly. Elias continued. Rule number 2. Humans fix things. Machines, alliances, broken systems, broken people. It is what we do. If you want peace, stability, and survival, do not exile the ones who run toward the fire. A large, armored delegate from the Trovax Dominion stood abruptly, his claws clacking against the platform. And your third rule, he demanded. Elias locked eyes with him. We do not tolerate those who hurt innocents to gain power. Gasps spread across the chamber like a wave. The Vornaxian representatives stiffened, their scaled faces shimmering with sudden panic. The largest among them rose, his voice crackling with static fury. Human, you speak as though you wield authority over us. Elias took a step forward, ignoring the flare of pain that shot up his leg. After what you attempted today, I speak with the authority of someone who saved every life in this station. Where were you when your operatives tried to kill thousands? The Vornaxian's throat frills flared in rage. You presume too much. The Ascendancy does not fear one wounded soldier. Elias replied, you do not fear me. But you fear what my people represent. He let the moment sink in, every silent heartbeat tightening the chamber's tension. A species that cannot be intimidated. A species that confronts chaos and wins. Arkina stepped forward then, her voice slicing through the air like a crystalline blade. The evidence is irrefutable. The Ascendancy orchestrated a false justification for war. She gestured toward the holographic feed. Their deception cost lives. Their deception nearly destroyed us. The speaker struck his staff against the dais, the sound ringing across the chamber. The council will deliberate on sanctions. Elias cut in sharply. They tried to blame Earth for an act of mass murder. His voice grew deeper, firmer, every syllable carrying the unyielding resolve of a species forged through fire, storms, and centuries of clawing their way upward. If the council wants humanity to trust them again, then they must show that justice exists here. The chamber darkened slightly as the ambient lights dimmed in response to rising tension. Delegates exchanged uneasy looks. Some nodded. Some trembled. Some stared at Elias with newfound respect. Arkina's voice softened, though it carried just as far. He is right. The council cannot claim authority while bowing to fear. A silence followed, heavy enough to feel physical. Then, the speaker said, "What do you propose, Captain Ward?" Elias stepped into the center of the chamber, every eye turning toward him. Bring the Vornaxian operatives to trial publicly. Not in shadows. Not behind closed doors. Show the galaxy what really happened. Impossible, the Vornaxian leader snarled. You will tear apart centuries of political order. Then you should not have set a trap that killed your own agent when the device malfunctioned, Elias replied sharply. Gasps erupted again, even Arkina's crystalline glow flickered with surprise. The Vornaxian's posture stiffened, he had been exposed, and every species in the room saw it. Elias spoke again, softer now, but every word carried like a pulse through the room. We are done being your scapegoat. Humanity will not be the galaxy's easy villain anymore. The chamber's lights intensified, reacting to rising emotional resonance. The speaker raised his staff once more. The council will recess to vote on Captain Ward's proposal. As the delegates began to murmur and stand, Arkina leaned toward Elias. Whatever happens next, she whispered, you have changed the course of this council. Perhaps of the galaxy. Elias exhaled slowly, his burned hands trembling as he lowered them at his sides. I did not come here to change the galaxy, he said. I came here to do the right thing. Arkina's voice softened even further. That, she said, is why you succeeded. And as the chamber prepared to vote again, this time not on Earth's expulsion but on the truth, the galaxy watched a human reshape the stars with nothing but integrity, fire, and an unwavering refusal to stand down. The council chamber dimmed as the delegates filed into the voting tiers, their movements tense and deliberate, every footstep echoing across the polished alloy floor like a countdown to something irreversible. Captain Elias Ward remained in the center of the room, the cold blue glow of the suspended holograms flickering across his injured hands and scorched uniform, but he stood with the calm, unwavering posture of someone who had already accepted the consequences of whatever would come next. High Consul Arkina stayed beside him, her crystalline form shimmering with shifting bands of light that pulsed like a heartbeat, a quiet reminder that although Earth had been cast out, he no longer stood alone. As the speaker lifted his crystalline staff, a hush descended over the chamber until even the hum of the graveplate seemed to hold its breath. "Delegates," the speaker announced, his voice resonating through the massive hall, "you will now cast your votes regarding the motion proposed by Captain Elias Ward of Earth, the public trial of those responsible for the sabotage of this station." A soft chime vibrated through the air as the holographic displays lit up across every tier. Delegates raised their hands or tapped interfaces, their eyes narrowed, lips pursed, some burning with outrage, others brimming with reluctant respect. Elias could not read their expressions, he only felt the heavy pressure of the moment settling across his ribs. Arkina stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Whatever the outcome, your actions today will echo for centuries." Elias exhaled slowly, the air cool and sharp in his lungs. "I did not do this to make history." "Exactly," she replied, "and that is why you are making it." The chamber lights flickered as the vote concluded, the speaker's staff slammed against the dais with a ringing crack that sliced through the silence. "The motion passes," he declared. The words landed like a shockwave, rippling through the tiers as dozens of delegates gasped, shouted, or leaned back in stunned disbelief. The Vornaxian delegation erupted in furious hisses, their talons scraping against metal, but armed guards moved in swiftly, encircling them as holographic restraints flickered into place around their wrists. Elias felt a deep, quiet relief unfurl in his chest, not triumph, not victory, simply the weight of truth finally being acknowledged. Arkina's crystalline skin brightened with a warm luminosity he had never seen before. "You changed their minds," she said. Elias shook his head. "No. They changed their own minds when they saw what the truth looked like." The speaker raised his voice once more. "Captain Ward, step forward." Elias did, ignoring the lingering ache in his shoulder. The speaker's gaze held not hostility, not suspicion, but something far more rare from the galactic elite, respect. "Your world was cast out for fear that humanity's unpredictability posed a threat," the speaker said. "Yet today, you demonstrated that your greatest unpredictability is courage in the face of danger, even danger aimed at you." Arkina bowed her head slightly, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Humanity has shown the Council a truth none of us expected." The speaker lifted his staff. "By unanimous emergency vote, the expulsion of Earth is hereby suspended pending full review." Gasps spilled across the room. A few shouted objections. But the speaker continued. "Humanity will be reinstated as provisional members of this council until the review is completed." Elias nodded once, he did not smile, but a flicker of something warm moved behind his eyes. Relief, perhaps. Or simply the recognition that doing the right thing had not been for nothing. The guards began leading the Vornaxian delegates away, their protests echoing hollowly through the hall. As the chamber slowly dissolved into chaotic murmurs, Arkina turned toward Elias, her voice softer than the hum of the stabilizer core he had saved. "You realize this is only the beginning." Elias glanced at the retreating delegates, then at the sprawling chamber filled with fear, awe, and change. "Beginnings are something humans are good at." A faint crystalline laugh escaped her, light as chimes. "The galaxy will not know what to do with you." Elias finally allowed himself a tired breath, the pain settling across his muscles like a fading storm. "They do not have to know," he said. "They only have to learn." Arkina's glow softened. "And who will teach them?" Elias looked toward the chamber doors, where a corridor of waiting cameras and observers stretched like a path carved through uncertainty. "All of us," he answered, stepping forward. "That is humanity's rule." And as he walked out of the chamber, side by side with the crystalline leader who had once doubted him, the station around them buzzed with a single, undeniable truth: the galaxy had tried to cast Earth into darkness, and humanity answered by becoming the light.